As a teenager, I was fortunate to be granted permission to fish a largely forgotten lake in the grounds of an old country manor house. And when with my very first cast I landed this huge 5-pound mirror carp, I was absolutely certain that I'd found my own personal Redmire. The legendary farm pond, considered by many to be the birthplace of modern carp fishing. Originally stocked in 1934 with 50 galacian carp by Donald Leney of the Surrey Trout Farm, this tiny pool had gone on to dominate carp fishing for the next 50 years, producing the first 30-pounder to Bob Richards, followed a year later by Richard Walker and a 44-pound common, the first truly big fish caught by design. And then possibly most famously of all, in 1980, on the opening day of the season, Chris Yates managed to land a 51.5-pound mirror carp, a truly incredible feat. And it seemed to me that if I could catch a 5-pounder inches from the bank in just a few minutes, then this lake had to contain 30s, 40s, 50s and possibly even 60-pound fish. Now unfortunately, that was just youthful enthusiasm and optimism in overdrive, and it turned out that the fish didn't reach anywhere close to those rates. And even more unfortunately, in around 1990, the lake suffered a catastrophic dam failure, and it was only the quick thinking of some estate staff that managed to save a handful of the stock and move them to a much smaller pond on the estate. But it's always been a bit of an obsession with mine, and I spent quite a long time researching the history of the place and the lake, and everything points to the fact that although they don't reach the size of the Redmire fish, they are cut from the same cloth, so to speak, and they are undoubtedly Leneys. And when you see them close up, it's difficult to dispute this, because they share all the classic characteristics: the torpedo-shaped body and the heavy scaling. But what does make these fish unique is the fact that, unlike many of the places that Donald Leney stocked, these fish have remained totally alone and isolated, purely unadulterated stock, because even Redmire ended up getting stocked with ghost carp at some point, and many of the angling clubs that bought these fish supplemented the stock in later years, whereas these have been left totally alone. Now, I normally limit my visits to once every decade or so, but recently a rather special rod and reel have come into my possession, and it seemed only fitting to take them out for the first time in pursuit of these lovely old carp. The reel is a 1930s aerial Allcock aerial, I should say, to be more precise, and that's paired with this incredible split cane rod made by Paul Cook. It is a truly magnificent piece of craftsmanship, and I was so excited that I cobbled together a period correct float just to get into the swing of things. And of course, like Chris Yates, it seemed only right to use sweet corn as bait. And we all know how quiet and careful you have to be around carp because they're incredibly spooky. And the world's worst fishing dog, Boris, had come along to help out by guarding against any noisy sticks that may interfere with my fishing. And surprisingly, the row he was making didn't actually upset the fish too much, and it wasn't long before the float sailed away and I got my first chance to try out this fantastic setup that, whilst not new, I mean, the reel's about 90 years old. I think the rod's around 20 years old, but they're new to me. And it was a great experience to hear the line sing in the wind and the rod take on its fighting curve. Now, I'd like to say everything went smoothly, but these things rarely do. And one of the things with this neglected pond is that there are quite a few snags around the edge, and unfortunately, after a very good tussle, the carp that I was attached to managed to get himself wrapped up in one of the snags. But luckily, I was able to get the net underneath it, free it from the snag, save the float, cut the line, and bring everything safely ashore. Boris came over for a look, but he wasn't that interested. Although what is interesting about these fish is in all the years I've fished for them and watched them, I've only ever seen mirror carp. It is mirror carp that breed mirror carp that breed mirror carp. I've never seen sight nor sound of a common. And having come for a quiet look, Boris then went back to destroying any noisy sticks that might interfere with the fishing. Now, I felt like chancing my arm, and I always carry a few floating baits with me whenever I go carp fishing, regardless of the time of year, and these have been blowing over to the far side up against the lily pad, and there was 2 or 3 fish just gingerly taking the odd one here and there. And it's not an easy little pond to get around, but seeing that and knowing that these fish, some of these fish are going to be well over 30 years old, I thought I'd fight my way through the undergrowth and see if there wasn't an unknown monster lurking in the lily pads, because there's always that chance. I was just waiting for a fish to come close enough to the edge of the pads to at least give me half a chance of landing it. And the breeze seemed to be blowing luck in my direction. And an opportunity presented itself. And was then lost. And it could just be that, just like Redmire, this little farm pond is never going to give up all of its secrets.